Today you are going to become a master of the clone stamp tool. So just in case you don't know where that is, it is located right here in your tools palette. Sometimes if it looks a little different, it may mean that you have your pattern stamp tool, and that will not do the same thing, so please make sure you have the clone stamp tool selected. And then we're going to go up here to the options bar to make sure everything's working the way we want it to. So to start, we are going to bring our hardness right around, I would say around 30%. Don't worry about size, we're going to be using our bracket keys to adjust for size. As far as opacity, we are going to start at 100%, and we are going to bring our flow up to 100% as well. Okay, so what we're looking at here is we're looking at a family portrait, right? And then we're looking at all these people in that family portrait that we definitely don't want there. So we need to get rid of them. And I don't want to crop this photo because I want all of this in this family portrait. So what can we do? We can clone stamp them out. Now the trick to the clone stamp is it cannot look clone stamped. So this is going to take a little bit of effort. So step one, you need to go over to your layers palette and you need to add you need to duplicate the background layer. So to do that, there are two places. You can go here and just go to duplicate layer, or you can press Command J, so your choice. Okay, so always make sure you're working on this background layer. Then what we're going to do is I'm going to adjust my brush size to work for what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start with this area right here. So I'm going to use my left bracket key to basically make this fairly small. And I'm going to zoom much more in. Okay, so I want to basically eliminate these two girls right here. Okay, in order to use your clone stamp, here's how this works. The first thing you have to do is you have to select a source point. And to select a source point, you have to press the Option key on your keyboard. So find the Option key on your keyboard. Press that down, and what you end up with is this bullseye. So you have to hold the Option key down just until you figure out where you want your source point. The source point is where you're going to grab from initially. Okay, so if I'm trying to erase her from this pillar right here, I definitely don't want to be sourcing from this water area over here because the two textures, colors, everything, tone won't match. So we try to get as close as we can to what we're trying to remove. So I'm going to be right above her here, and I'm going to click one time. And then I'm going to release that Option key so that I have my brush back. Now here's the next important, your first click after selecting a source point basically defines the distance that source point and where you're working is going to remain, okay? So if I come over here and I click once, that plus sign is my source point, and everywhere I move, see how it moves with me? But it always stays the same distance. Okay, so what I would like to do is I'm going to Option click right above her and then move slightly down. And then now my source point stays really close to where my brush is. Okay, and I can work that way. But I have to keep an eye on where that source point's going, because if it goes in the wrong spot, then basically it's going to create highlights and shadows I don't want. So I'm going to use a slightly smaller brush in here because I got some highlights going on and I need to remove that. So my source point's really close, and I'm basically going to work right here to get rid of her. And don't be afraid to go back the other way. And sometimes if it looks like maybe you need to overlap some color, don't worry if you mess up a little bit. You can always go over an area. I'll show you something. And by the way, I'm constantly reselecting more at my source point. Okay, at this point, she looks pretty gone. I mean, there are some areas in here that just because of the way the light is, like she's fairly invisible. But what I'm going to do down here so that way it blends better is I'm going to drop my flow now down to about 30-ish%. And what that's going to do is if I come in here, it's going to help make it so the line blends. So there's not like a very defined line there. And then I can come back in here and make sure I get rid of this girl a little bit better. Okay. Also, because you're dealing with water, You have to make sure, pay attention to any reflections that anybody is casting, because if there's a reflection of the person, you didn't really get rid of them well enough. Okay, so that's where she was. And what it should look like is it should almost look like she just disappears, but nothing else really changes. Okay, so let's try this one over here. Now, to do something like this, you have to pay attention to a couple of things. One is she has a lot of shapes and lines intersecting her body. So what you need to do is you need to make sure your brush is large enough. I would say bring your flow back up to, I'm going to bring it to about 80%. And then I'm going to option click right on this line where the water is going to intersect her legs, okay? I'm going to get fairly close, and then I'm going to come in, and if you look really closely inside this brush, you can see like a preview of what's about to be plotted down, okay? And you work going from both sides, otherwise your lines won't line up very well. Okay, so there's the first one. Next one. And you gotta be careful. Sometimes if you get on an area where you're recreating the same highlight over and over again, it's not going to look right. So be careful of that as well. And make sure your lines line up as best as you can. Okay, so we have this little bit of a wave kind of going through her. So notice the way I'm working with the water. Water works horizontally, so don't grab from above and then try to drag it down below. Okay? Don't work vertically. And make sure you come, like I've said just a second ago, make sure you work coming from both directions, and you just keep on looking for patterns. That way you can make sure you get the major area, so that if those lines don't line up, it will look strange. And don't be afraid to go over something you've already gone over, okay? Because sometimes the first thing you've done will not look the best. Okay, and here what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a slightly larger brush so I don't get this stamped look that's happening right now. And then I can come in and clean that up that way. Again, don't forget to come in from both directions. Okay. Be careful using a large brush like this, because if it doesn't line up, it's going to look very, very strange. See, I'm starting to undo a few things that I don't want to undo. Okay, so just so you can see, so you don't have to watch me basically do this entire thing, here's what's happening so far. Okay, so she should look like just she is leaving and the water isn't changing direction or doing something funky. But I'll show you another one that I've already completed over here. So as you can see, these same two people. Okay. All right, so here is your job. You are going to remove this girl here, and this entire group over here. And it needs to look like the water and the background have not been touched. So take your time, zoom in, and that's what you're doing. You are leaving these people here. Okay, so don't touch the people that are actually looking at the camera. Everybody else needs to go away. The people on the pier can stay unless you're feeling overly ambitious. You may try to remove them as well. And this is what you're going to be turning in for this exercise, okay? So you don't need to come up and create anything on your own, just this one. Good luck. Let me know if you have any questions.